Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this stream. We are super excited to have Alex Lifeson to talk about the 25th anniversary of his album Victor. And it's great to see so many people online. Thank you so much for joining. Make Word Music has been around for about 7 years. I know that a lot of people are new here because you're coming to see Alex. So we have a lot of great interviews, a long history of videos, a couple hundred videos, including interviews with Steve Vai, Devin Townsend, a lot of really great artists, the residents. We're all over the map. So I encourage you to go check out some of our old content. And I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe. We have a lot of great new stuff coming up, a lot of King Crimson related content. We have an interview coming up with Henry Kaiser and Andy West of the Dixie Dregs, and a lot of other really interesting artists. So thank you again for joining us today. And I'm going to kick this off by introducing you to Andre Chumley, who will be the host of this interview. And Andre, thanks so much for facilitating this conversation. And Alex, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
A pleasure to be here. And yes,
Good to see you again.
good to see you, Al. How have you been?
I've been okay, as everybody, just kind of dealing with this coronavirus and all that the pandemic brings in our change of lives. I'm doing okay. A little bored, but starting to get into a few little different projects and just trying to keep as busy as I can.
That's great. That's great to hear. Yes, we last met at Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
looking at guitars. We're here we're going to talk about all kinds of things, folks. But one of the things that I noticed just a couple weeks ago is that it's the 25th anniversary of Victor, the great record that you put out in 1996. And and what's also remarkable is that happens to be kind of the halfway point in this incredible journey that we've all been with you musically. So that's one of the things I want to talk about. What's interesting too is I remember at the time you spoke about that record being very cathartic, very spiritual for you, very cleansing. It was an interesting record lyrically, and you said it really had you dig down and kind of restart. It was a start. Any Rush fan knows that you guys have always changed and developed and evolved through the years. But after that record, wow, there was just some real fresh stuff coming out of you. Reflect back for a minute on that. On did it hit your goals in terms of a restart, that record?
Sure. Getty and his wife Nancy were expecting their second child, and Ged wanted to take a year off. We really hadn't taken very much time off at all up to that point. And he wanted to take some time off and be with her, be with the family and new baby and all of that stuff. I thought a year off I'm going to be kind of antsy, but this is a great opportunity for me to get into something on my own. And doing the record it was all about just really wanting to do something and keeping myself busy. I worked on the whole thing, writing the lyrics, production, all the recording, working on the cover and the artwork, everything about the project I was involved in, as you would expect a solo record to be. So it was a really good exercise for me to explore some of my own musical ideas independent of my two partners. Love working with those guys. They're, Getty's my best friend forever. But this was something about me. It was something that I really had to do to prove myself that I could actually make this conscious effort to do something big that required a lot of work, dedication, and attention. So I dove into it, and I got together with a bunch of my friends, and they played on the record, and it just started growing and growing, and it became that project for that year. And I came out of it feeling like I really did something special for myself. I was of the opinion that if no one bought the record, If we got sold one record, that was a success. It was all about going through this exercise on my part and doing it. Recorded it in my basement in my little studio on 8-app machines. Um, all my amps were there and my guitars. Friends that came over to work on the record stayed over. It was really, really a fun event for all of us. Looking back on it lyrically, that was a very difficult record for me to do. I'm not a lyricist, and I don't, and having such an amazing lyricist in the band like Neil, it was hard not to be influenced by that and try to write at that level, which was just not possible for me. I feel like I did the best that I could. If I was to do it over again, I don't know what I would do. Spend more time on the lyrics or try to do it in a different language or something and fool everybody. But again, at the same time, there were a lot of people that were having problems in their relationships around me, friends, family members. So there was a lot to work from at the time. But when I got through it, it was really a treat for me. And I still feel very proud of the effort, and it's definitely a love of my life.
That's wow. That's great. I love it too. And many things I love about it, but the timelessness of it. When it came out, it there's some synthesizers on it. There's some textures. There's some spoken word things. I speak to Rush fans a lot who still haven't heard it, so it kind of went under the radar. That's why I was excited let's give it a little spotlight. But it's quite the word timeless is kind of trite, but what I love about it too is there was always this discussion of the time of when Rush went into a lot of synthesizers, and you've said a lot about that in interviews. Some things you would have changed, some things you liked over the years. Talk to me a little bit about the synthesizer approach, because it's really wow. It's just there's synths on almost more than half the tracks. Beautiful stuff. How do you feel now about where synthesizer and guitar kind of ended up for you throughout all those years?
Well, I don't have a problem really with keyboards. Certainly with Rush, we always wanted to go somewhere else. We always wanted to explore something else. And very early on, in sort of the later part of the 70s, when we started to introduce keyboards in the band, we took it upon ourselves to learn how to play those things. Geddy played a little bit of piano, and so he sort of got into it. I had a little bit of background, so pedals and other keyboard stuff. But that was always something that he did. And, when we got to the mid 80s with Rush, we really dove into the whole production thing, working with Peter Collins. He came from that sort of background. So the whole exploration of really developed keyboards happened. That happened in the recording process before the guitars. So now I was competing for space sonically amongst the keyboards. And it was a real challenge to fit the guitar in once you have all these mid-ranged keyboards laid in. So, I'm proud of those records that we did back then. I think they're really unique for us in our whole history. But it was definitely a tough job to work around what we were doing there. And I kind of missed the drive of the guitar because it was, everything became so layered. And I think in the early 90s, we sort of turned around a little bit and started to get back into that groove. And by counterparts, we were sort of right back in there and had a nice, I think, balance between keyboard events and guitar and the power that brings. With Victor, because I had an open slate, I could really do whatever I want. And I worked with my son Adrian on a bunch of stuff. He'd been writing and playing a lot of electronic music. Oops. And he, although he started with guitar when he was about 14 or 15, that was the kind of music that he was into for his age. And so he brought a lot of really cool melodies. He brought a lot of the technical end of mapping keyboards and sequencing parts and things like that. So it just became fun for me to fiddle around and do some things keyboard wise on my own, having, you know, my own material and being very open about the way I was putting it together. So for me there was no conflict at the time. It was all part of putting it together.
That's great, and that's great to hear you reaffirm that you really did love that material. And as you've said in some interviews, which is great, and what a special time as a fan too. I was a big fan of synthesizers, so when suddenly one of my favorite bands integrated all that stuff in Signals, Power Windows. What's really cool, I think, for any Rush fan is how you've always changed. You know, you've always a lot of great guitarists kind of pick a sound, they pick an axe, and that's what they use. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
No.
Angus Young, SG Marshall, I'll take it all day long. But one of the inspiring things is you've gone all around the map from the stacks to the Strat sounds to the piezo type pickups, back and forth. Really remarkable, and thank you for giving us all a template there to experiment. A question on post Victor. Again, we can hear that so many new things you came up with on that record, and then right after that, you guys did like Test for Echo and Vapor Trails, and things got again very textural. One interesting thing about Vapor Trails, there's no solos really on it. You're very expansive and textural. Talk a little bit about that period as we come forward in time.
Well, Vapor Trails was a very, very difficult record to make. Neil was, coming off his tragic, and coming off is not the right term, but he was returning after those few years after the loss of his family, basically. I don't know, when Ged and I were writing the material, I didn't want to, I didn't want the spotlight. I don't want this a solo in the song where the attention was on the guitar in that way. I wanted to really feel like it was a band effort. This was the three of us back together after coming very, very close to never working again. And in my mind, I didn't want to stand out in any way. And I just wanted to be a part of the team. So kind of wrote in that way. That record took us over a year and 2 or 3 months to make. In the very beginning, we were writing stuff, and after a few weeks, we hated it and got rid of it. And we'd never had that problem before. And Neil was coming back after not playing for a few years. So it was a climb for him to get back into shape for recording. There were a lot of challenges at the time. Our souls are really in that record. And I think it's a very, very unique record for us. And it represents that period that we were going through, which was very, very dark. But I think at the end of it, we came out of it into the light. And it's actually a positive move forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's so many. It might sound extreme, but there's so many life lessons when folks have really enjoyed the art of Rush and the things you've all said. And selflessness is one of those beautiful things. Anyone who's seen the movie knows what dear close friends the three of you are still in the universe. And what a great point that you came to that record and said, I mean, it's a team. I don't need these, Jumping back to Victor, I think that's also something remarkable. And you've said this before, that you decided you didn't want to have it be Alex Lifeson record. Victor, you had this team kind of spirit with the record. Now, there's rumors out there that you had some other, you wanted to follow that up, and there was something maybe with Sarah McLachlan. Tell us how real any of that was, or if you have another bank of songs for Victor, continue.
Sarah McLachlan. I didn't hear that one.
I know. I said that can't be true.
No, that's not true.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, okay.
She's awesome. But yeah, it was, never I never even talked about that. But I, over the years, because I've had a studio at home forever, when we had time off, I always wrote stuff. I still have, I don't know how much material, hours of stuff that I would develop, with maybe with drum samples, and sometimes I got friends to come in and play on some of this. And I think I spoke to you about it at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Um, because Steve Howe was doing this. He was releasing some of his demos,
Right.
right? We were talking about that, and it occurred to me that this would be a great avenue for me, a way of releasing some of this kind of cool music that was from the time, not super produced, not big record kind of thing, but really cool little vignettes, musical vignettes of where I was at that time. So I still have all that stuff. Still talk about doing it. I've done some writing. After we finished the last tour in 2015, I couldn't sit still, so I started just writing on my own and doing some stuff. Getty was working on his book. We talked about getting together and doing some stuff together, but it got very, very busy for him, even after he finished writing the book, taking it on the road. And so he never got a chance to sit down and start working or just having some fun together. We still talk about it, and I'm sure we will. Of course, now with the pandemic, it's kind of wrecked things for a bit, but we're both eager to get back together and kind of get back into that thing that we've done since we were, 14 years old, that we love to do, and we work really, really well together. So we'll see what happens with that. But I don't know. I go back and forth. I'm kind of a lazy person, and the prospect of doing a record after doing Victor and spending a year on it, and knowing what it took, I don't know if I'm in such a big hurry to go through that sort of thing again. The advantage of working on my own in my own place is that I can work whenever I want to, and it takes the pressure off a big release. Those days are sort of over anyways. I would just love to share some of my music if anyone's interested in hearing it, uh, at some point in the future.
That's very that's exciting to hear, and I can speak for I think people around the planet who absolutely would be interested in that. And yes, that was you had said you had heard some of Steve's kind of sketchbook releases, demo releases, and they're wonderful. They're really inspiring. I'm gonna jump around to some gear a little bit here, because one of the fun things that day for me was having you and Getty come by and check out Steve Howe's guitars. Now, one in particular, which is really an incredible guitar that you're kind of one of the only other rock guys associated with it, the beautiful Gibson ES 345, that's stereo. Wow. I mean, is that in the game lately? Is that something that you've picked up or done anything with?
It's a 355, the white one that I have. Yeah, I have a 345 and a bunch of 335s back here. In fact, the one that you see here is a 58, the first year that they made the 355s. So that's a very sweet sounding guitar. But I'm, we're renovating our condo, and we're getting close to the end finally. And I just took a bunch of guitars off the wall to take to our place, because I'm gonna have a nice little working space in this new place. So that's where that 335 is going right now. I don't know. I kind of, it all depends. I'm fortunate in that you can't see the rest of the guitars, but this wall goes up to about 16 feet, and it's all covered in guitars of all sorts. And I'm by and large a Gibson player, but I've played lots of stuff. PRS, I played for many years. They make a fabulous instrument. The Gibsons, I have some nice Fenders, some Tellys that I love. And so it really just all depends on what I'm looking for in terms of character. And I just pull it off the wall. They all speak a little differently. And being as old as I am, I got to play almost all of them at some point or another, usually on tour. So they all have a little bit of history, and I understand them and know their personalities. So it's kind of cool to pull things down and do some alt tunings and really have fun exploring. Lately, I found that I've just gotten sort of bored with standard tuning, and I've been messing around with a lot of alt tunings, really bizarre ones, more traditional ones. And now when I go back to standard tuning, it's like I'm a beginner. I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm a little scared about that.
Well, well, that's great news. And you said you were just, after a year, a very difficult year, of
Yeah.
course, in many ways, you were saying you're just now starting to, um, kind of tinker around and do some things. Um, how does that look the next 6 or 8 months? You think you'll hit record? And
Well, after Neil passed, it was very difficult to get inspired or motivated to play. It was, as you could imagine, we were very, very close. You lose anybody that's close, it's a profound thing. And I think both Getty and I expected to be better with it. Neil was sick for 3.5 years, and no one really knew about it. Well, lots of people knew about it, but it wasn't public information. So we thought that we would be prepared for the end when it came, and we weren't. Uh, we both really struggled with it, and I just same thing happened when his daughter passed away. I didn't play for quite a long time at all. Just music just didn't seem that important. And it was the same thing with this. And then COVID hit, and now we're all sort of in a different mental space. But for me, I think that first year of grieving is the milestone. And once you get past that, I think I don't know, it's an anniversary that you process, and it becomes a little easier to handle. I find, and with Neil, I'm always seeing pictures and I'm always reminded of him and all of that stuff. And that was difficult. But now that it's a year, um, I find that I think of the good times that we had together more than the sadness. And we had so many great times. We laughed so much over all those years. And aside from the work that we did and uh, being a partner to one of the greatest drummers in history and bass players for that matter, um, I just remember the laughing and the smiles and all of that stuff. So it rounds out the picture and it makes it a little easier to move forward. So once we got past the anniversary, it just so happened that Andy Curran, who used to work at our office, and we played in Coney Hatch, a Canadian band. Uh, Andy and I have been doing work together on a side project, and we've been doing this for the last 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer, actually. Yeah, actually longer. And I revisited some of those little projects that I left behind and started working on them again. And then in turn, something else came up down the pipeline, and all of a sudden I started playing, and I'm spending more time in here. And it's just, I mean, that's the best thing. I can't believe that I wasted the last 10 months. Well, not wasted, but I didn't do this for 10 months when I have nothing else to do. This is the perfect thing for me, so I'm just happy that I'm getting back into the swing of it. My fingers feel a lot better, and I'm enjoying music and making music again, really having fun with some of the stuff that we're doing right now. And I also get to explore different areas of a guitar. It's not heavy rock or anything. A lot of it's kind of very atmospheric. Some of it's very, very funky. Some of it's hard and heavy, but it's an opportunity for me to really explore different sounds and different tones And one of the things that I really enjoy about it is that I'm trying to create guitar parts on a guitar that don't sound anything like a guitar. So that's a real treat. And there's so many plugins, and I have such a pile of old gear, pedals and foot switches and all that junk. So it's really a lot of fun to kind of put that all together and go for it.
Beautiful guitar that doesn't sound like guitar. It's
Yeah, it's a challenge, and it becomes more of a rhythmic thing or an atmospheric thing. Uh, it's really a lot of fun for me to do that.
yeah. Well, one of the things I want to talk about is some of the sessions and things you've done recently. And speaking of guitar that doesn't sound like guitar, you did a beautiful track on the new Miniman McStein record where you did this. They call it the howling guitar. It's this. Uh, Talk about that session a little bit. That recent record, great record.
Well, Marco reached out, I guess about 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. He was doing a solo record, and he asked if I would be interested in playing on it. I knew of Marco, but I had never met him or anything. And I said, sure. We just came off tour. I'm very. Send me something, and I'll have a listen. So he sent me a track that he wanted me to play on, and I did some acoustic stuff on it, which was out of left field. And this is the other thing. I love doing things where whoever I'm doing it with, they come back and say, not in a million years would I expect this on this song. I just would never have thought anyone would think of something like this. And for me, that's the main compliment. So we did this track, and I sent the stems to him, and and he said, okay, I'm going to use the stems, your parts in the song, but I like these parts so much, I want to write another song around these parts. So that's what he did. He created another song from those same parts, and then we just sort of developed that. And we worked together on a few things. We wrote a song called Lover's Calling, and it's a long song. It's 8 or 9 minutes, I think, and it's a real epic, but it goes through so many changes and so many cool atmospheric things. And we brought in a singer that I've been working with Andy, Maya Wynn. She's just a fabulous vocalist. She has such a sensibility about how she approaches her vocals. They're very, very emotional. It's not rock singing, it's something else. And there's a real depth to her arrangements and the way she puts these things together. So I suggested to Marco that we get Maya to sing on the song, which she did do. We had a singer previously who did a great job, but was a more traditional sort of rock vocalization. But Maya turned it into this thing that you just fall into, and the vocal just wraps around you, and then the music comes in waves. And so I think it was a really successful collaboration, and it was great to be able to just share files. And I mean, everybody works that way now, basically, but there was a real growth, and it took about a year or more for the song to reach the point where we were happy with it, because we keep redoing things and updating sounds and parts and stuff like that. Rich Chicky did a mix of it for us. Rich, has done a bunch of our records. So I don't know. I think it's popped up in a couple of places. I know Marco had it on one of his other releases. But I was hoping to get it in on a re-release of Victor, because that was an idea that the label had. But unfortunately, with COVID, it all changed. But well, maybe I'll send the track to you. You can have a listen to it. But
Would
we were
love
really, really excited about it.
would love to hear it. Yeah, Marco, wonderful drummer, and
Oh, amazing.
yeah, I I've toured with him a bit with UK. Now, you guys were UK fans back in
Yeah,
the day,
yeah,
right?
sure. Yeah, good old Alan.
Oh, just Um, back to Victor for a minute, because you said some things there that again, I want this to speak to a lot of people who didn't get to hear the record. Atlantic, you always could say people could have done more for a record, but they really could have. But I have a philosophy that it's brand new to someone who hasn't heard it. But one of the things is there's lots of textures of guitar in there. There's Telecasters, the mandola is in there, right? And again, with that sense of just sharing, it's really beautiful. Bill Bell does some great stuff on it. I want to talk about a couple specific tracks, like "Strip and Go Naked," for instance, which is just a great short little thing, instrumental. Um, Tell me about that track, and if you've got some more things like that in your.
Yeah, it's one of the instrumental tracks of the four, I think, 3 or 4 instrumental tracks on the record. Wanted to really create a song that had that character to it of the mandola, that the folk sort of feel about it. And Bill is a great guitarist, and we did a couple of things. He was working and still does for Tom Cochran, and Tom's an old friend of mine. We're buddies for a long, long time. I really respect his music and his playing, and he's a great guy. And we did some work together, and Bill and I connected. And I said, I have this time off. I'm going to do a solo record. If you'd like to play on it, it would be great. We could do some stuff together. So we became very, very good friends, and Bill kind of really dove into the project. And that particular song, I really wanted to build it through that mandola sort of character. He's a great slide player, and he played some beautiful slide on that song. And then it has that, crescendo, or a double crescendo, and a very dark, sort of moody solo that's super compressed. So, it was just a lot of fun putting it together, and recording it, and mixing it, and all of that. And I think we achieved what we were going after with that particular song. There's no drums on it. It's just a drum machine with a kick and hi-hat, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's all the drum personality that's on that record. But yeah, it was kind of cool. I think I love playing the mandola. It's sitting right over there, and again, it's a different sort of instrument, so it's becomes a challenge to find cool things to do on it. Tuning's always a difficult thing on that particular instrument, because it doesn't really like being in tune. So it's always a challenge. But you learn a lot, I think, by doing that.
Yeah. No, beautiful instrument, and of course it showed up on a few other Rush
Yeah.
records, and really great. But beautiful piece, just a short little journey, that one.
Yeah.
Another flavor that's on the record is there's just some Alex Lifeson, just brutally heavy riffs. Like the album starts with some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Start today and don't care, and there's even some almost 9 Inch Nails kind of aggressive stuff on there. Talk to me a little bit about the track with Del Bello and the heavier stuff, the Don't Care and the Del Bello track.
Yeah, Start Today was really, it was a song about reaffirmation, and learning from difficult experiences, and putting it all together and moving forward, and understanding in a relationship that it's a two-way street, and what you give is what you get back. So having that in mind, and the whole concept of the record, I wanted to have a female voice on it. And Lisa, she had a lot of records out in the 80s, and she was quite a well-known Canadian artist in this country. But what a vocalist, and what an experience it was to work with her in the studio and watch her manipulate her voice and the microphone. It was, I was amazed watching her. You know, she would move her hands around in a certain way, and she would get around the microphone in another way. And she just really manipulated the whole thing. She just knew what she was doing in there, real professional. And don't think we did more than a few takes of whatever we were doing. She just nailed everything all the time. There's something about her voice at that time that was kind of reminiscent of Getty in the earlier days. And I think that was an attractive thing for me in that song. Well, you know, I wanted to have a woman singing in there, but it was kind of cool that there was that connection as well in terms of character, vocal character. I really enjoyed putting that song together. The acoustics that come in after the solo, there's a section where acoustics take over. And I must have tracked up 10 or 12 acoustic guitars for that piece. And some were recorded acoustically and some were recorded electrically through the pickup in the acoustic. And I just love the scooped mids in those acoustics. There's a really cool character about that song that really gets her voice sitting in that scoop, for me anyways, when I hear it, which was kind of a cool thing. And then riff wise, it's a little reminiscent of Zeppelin, but at the same time, I can't deny my inspiration and my roots. And I even said that to Jimmy Page when I met him the first time, that he'd been such an enormous influence. And I gave him a copy of the record and I said, you know, please accept this with my total respect. You are all over this record. Sorry. But that's where I came from. And that is what I hear. I hear him, I hear Jeff Beck, I hear maybe Steve Howe. I mean, all of those guys were so important to my growing up. And now I'm an old man who I suppose, who inspires other players or younger players. So it's kind of cool that you move that forward throughout generations.
Just beautiful to hear that. Before I go to a couple other tracks on this topic, yeah, that's one of the things really as a Rush fan too. You all always talked about what you were listening to. You know, there's some great interview clips, and Neil wrote that book about listening to music on the road, and you've always said, hey, I'm into this, I'm into that. There's a track I want to jump back. And by the way, folks, this is exciting to hear that Alex is going to be doing some music moving forward, because that's what it's about. It's about today and looking to the future. So I'm so excited to hear that tonight. And but looking back for a minute, I want to remind people that in a couple of days, the Moving Pictures is going to be 40 years old. I forget the date, but in about 2 weeks. And don't have to say what an incredible album that is to all of us and to your journey. But a track I want to talk about is the last track, Vital Signs, because that track just well, you've got the little bubbly sequencer synth on there. You've got and your guitar just takes a new turn. It kind of presages. You're doing those kind of Andy Summers stab chords. You're doing those, and it's the real. I think it's an incredible track. Also, what's incredible is the lyrics are about this stuff that no one knew about. Filters and random sampling, and there's all this stuff that, if you look back, presages a whole bunch of stuff. Take us to that track a little bit, because that could come out today with the little.
Yeah, boy, that's 25 years is tough enough with Victor. 40 years is a real stretch. Moving Pictures was by far the greatest record that we made, from our perspective. We had such a great time making that record. We were in a great space. We spent the summer working fairly close to Toronto, to home, writing it. When we went to the studio and started recording, it just, everything about it fell into place, and we really enjoyed the experience. I thought the material was strong and all of that stuff, but the recording process itself was really a lot of fun, and for the most part quite smooth. And that doesn't, that doesn't happen really very often. I could tell you horror stories about Grace Under Pressure. That was so difficult to make, and Vapor Trails. But moving pictures was really a delight. When we came to that song, and I have to jog my memory, but when we came to that song, we had stuff on the record like YYZ and Limelight and Tom Sawyer, that were pretty big rock, traditional sort of rock songs. Maybe a little more concise than our previous writing, as we were moving into that kind of writing economy that we sort of moved into from the late 70s. But when we came to that, it was just really different in the way we arranged it and put it together. Starting with the sequencer and having that part and working out a guitar part above that, around that. And Neil was really into that kind of a drum approach to that ska, sort of more of a reggae-ish. When I say reggae-ish, I mean modern white reggae. And he was really looking forward to that. And he was messing around with electronic drums at the time too. So it all became a part of this little exploration. And, it touched on certain things that were, coming to the world from that point forward. So that's really it.
Yeah.
I can't really remember too much else about it.
No, it really is. I think just it kicked the door open to a time and a sound. So that's great.
Yeah.
I'm getting a couple questions in, so let's see if we got a couple good questions from people. But I wanted to talk about Canada for a second too, because a country near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of family there, and there's just something in the water. I mean, there's you guys, and you talk about alternate tuning before, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, and then those great bands like Gowan and Toronto, Oscar Peterson, Drake, Max Webster. Toronto. I mean. And I love that you have worked with so many folks, Tom Cochrane and Red Ryder. So two quick questions. Have you been in touch with Jeff Jones in recent years, the early bass player?
Yeah, I haven't seen Jeff in about 4 years. We did a gig together actually at the golf club that I'm a member at. There was a 10th anniversary in 2016, and they wanted to do something really special, the owners at the time. So they asked Tom and me if we would put something together and play. And at the time, Jeff was still playing with Tom for many years. He was in Red Ryder,
Right.
and he continued with Tom over the years. So they were like a backup band, and they came to do the gig. We got a big stage, lighting. We got PA all over the club and outside. It was like a gig. It was like a really legitimate gig. There were, I don't know, 500 people there, all members and their guests. And it was one of the best gig experiences I've ever had. We had so much fun. So I got to play with Jeff then. We did a bunch of Rush stuff. We did some Tom Cochrane stuff. And I would bump into Jeff over the years when we played with Red Ryder in the earlier days, and we've stayed in touch. And like I said, I haven't seen him in a while, but we do cross paths, and it's pretty remarkable that so many years later, 53 years later, we still have a connection, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that was a really fun night. And Bill came, played with Tom. They did an acoustic set. We had the Trailer Park Boys come in from Halifax, and they did their shtick.
Right.
So it was a real special night. We had a lot of fun.
Was that captured at all? Is there some video, or who knows?
I don't know if there was any like proper video done of it. It was an oversight. We should have done something, but I haven't seen anything ever.
Yeah.
But I don't know that maybe there is something. I don't know. Not sure.
Well, that's great, and of course we got a lot of hardcore Rush fans here that know that you and Jeff, that was the beginning of the band in '68. Rush with John Rutsey and Jeff. Um, Also, Pete Cardinelli, for instance, he plays on Victor, and I know you did a lot of jamming with him at the Orbit room. Tell us what's the status of the Orbit these days with
The
all.
orbit's closed down. It closed down early last year.
Hmm.
So uh, I'd sort of drifted away from the club. It was there for 20 years, and um, I don't know. Things change, and I was very excited in the beginning. I used to go and play whenever I had a chance on Friday nights or Saturdays. Played with the Dexters, and Pete was in the band. Um, uh, but as things progressed, it's a tough business. Uh, and I think I just kind of lost interest it just wasn't part of my life so much anymore. So I hung in there, and Tim, my partner, kept going. And then eventually I decided to get out of the business, and I left a few years ago, and he carried on for a while. And then I think it was just too much with COVID coming, and um, he was never going to survive. And it was a struggle as it was. The Orbit Room was a very cool place. In those early years, particularly, it was live music every night. And in the city, we didn't have that back then. Place you could go to for live music. And it was very, different from night to night. We had, R&B, we had jazz, we had all kinds of stuff.
Fun.
And it was really a fun place. But I find that all those places, they have their life, and then it moves on. And we had our regulars, but eventually they grew up or they moved on, and things sort of change, and it sort of loses that specialness, I suppose. But we did have some really, really great times there.
No, that's a very honest and realistic look. Some great videos out there, folks, of Alex playing blues stuff and some
Yeah.
funk stuff. A couple questions from the folks out there. Someone is asking, Christopher Clement's asking, as a total gearhead, is there the one that got away? Is there like a guitar that you still kind of wish you could get or that you missed, or a piece of gear?
Not in terms of guitars. I was never a collector in the early days. I regret that because, in the 70s, for example, I would have had greater access to a larger number of vintage instruments that weren't particularly vintage, like older Les Pauls from the 50s and particularly from 1960. Um, so I never kind of took advantage of that. I always believed that, guitar is what you do with it. It doesn't really matter. So most of my guitars from back then are vintage now only because I'm this old and they are old as well. So, but in the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, I did start to vary my collection a little bit, and I got a couple of older vintage guitars, some Gretsch and 57 Les Paul Gold Top, and as I said, the 335, a couple of those, actually a few from that era. So I don't know. I I have a telly that I use. It's a 58 reissue, and I bought it in the early 80s. I traded an SG that I wasn't crazy about at the time, and I traded it in for this guitar at a music shop that we used to deal with. And I'll tell you, I've probably written 80% of our music on that guitar. It's just, I don't know, it's so comfortable to work on. I took all the finish off the neck, so it's just bare wood and it feels great. I love the sound of it. Uh, my hands just feel so comfortable on that guitar. And for writing, that was really the one for me. That was the kind of the standard writing guitar. And of course, I used it a lot on records. Typically back then, it was a Les Paul on the left and, the Telly on the right, or some sort of combination like that. So, I have lots of guitars and they're my tools, and I use them and I know them. Uh, but there's nothing that I feel like, damn it, I missed that one, or an amp, or anything like that, really.
Is there another question kind of leads to, is there ever a thought of, what a beautiful book Getty did, the Book of Bass, is there a thought of documenting these at all, either on the web or doing a book or somehow telling that story?
Not really. No, I saw what he went through, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's a little different for him because it became just this whole exploration for him of all things bass guitar. So he started collecting, before he did the book. It's not like he was collecting for 40 years. Most of his collection is more recent. And once he got into the book, he wanted to get specific instruments or specific models, and write about those things and the history, and all of that stuff. Um, I'm like I said earlier, I'm a little lazy. I'm not that committed, or feel a need to jump in that deeply into something like that. In fact, what I'd like to do sometime in the near future is to sell my collection. I would keep, a handful of instruments, but I'd love to sell my collection for, well, some charities that I'm involved with. I think that would be really a great way for uh, for these fabulous instruments that have been so sweet and dear to me, uh, to carry on and do something very powerful and positive for the world. So that's something that I've been exploring, in fact, in the last few days.
Wow, that's beautiful, and what a way to put it forward, Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Over to Victor again. On that note, one of the more all of the lyrics, by the way, folks, I really urge you to go check the lyrics out on this record, because it really, as Alex is speaking about, they get into some very interesting areas. But what's interesting is the last track on the record, "I Am the Spirit," and as you've said before, that there's some dark moments, there's some humorous moments. That song just pulls it all together. It's so positive uh, uh, about life, about different things. Talk to me about that song, because I love that one. "I Am the Spirit."
Yeah. Well, I wanted to close the record with a very positive statement, um, in kind of reevaluating myself, or anyone for that matter. Your strengths and your weaknesses, they make up your character, and both work together, the yin and the yang. Um, your weaknesses are just as important as your strengths. And this is how we progress and learn, and move on. And in terms of a relationship, again, the underlying theme is it goes two ways, and there needs to be an understanding, and compromise, and care and love, and all of those things. And I wanted to kind of encapsulate everything in that song. Um, and even the fade out at the end uh, just carries the melody, and it gives you a chance to catch your breath, and think about it as it's ending. And it doesn't fade to infinity. It stops eventually. So you know that there's a point to get off and move forward. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at with that.
Yeah.
That's a cool song. It's traditional in a lot of ways, in a rock format, but halfway through the song, it becomes another song that's
Right.
completely different. But it's a really important part of the story of the song, and it's a chance to catch your breath and surround yourself with a different energy. I hope that
Beautiful.
doesn't sound corny, but
No,
always the
just
intention.
the lyrics, I go back to them all the time. That there's just some uplifting stuff. Also, just as from the Rush nerd side of things, there's a little Easter egg that I'm hearing. There's a little bit of a Spirit of Radio lick, you know.
Yeah, in that one, yeah.
Yeah, so that's if one listens. Well, it's like a cousin of that, you know. It's
Yeah, exactly.
a little pull off sort of thing. But at the time, you had said that you know, you'd love to put something together and get this music on the road. Looking forward, I mean, we're in this global nightmare, you know. But we all hope, all touring musicians, that we're gonna beat this. Do you envision that maybe that you even a short tour where you can do this material and then some brand new stuff altogether? Is there a thought of that?
Honestly, I think it's very unlikely.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to get back on the road for a while yet, probably for another year. It's great that we have the vaccines, and although it's been a slow beginning, it'll ramp up, but it's still going to be, you know, you're talking about 350 million people in America, and I know in this country, you know, we're in single digit uh, progress with vaccines. Like I said, it'll get better, but it's going to be a while yet, and I think we're going to be in the same state for another year. Um, and then things, I guess, will turn around, and we'll get back into touring and live concerts and all of that stuff. But I gotta say that uh, I'll be 68 if that happens in a year from now, and I don't know. At this age, I don't really have an interest in doing it. You know, we toured for 40 years. I lived in hotels for 40 years. I was away from the people that I loved, and that's all part of it, and I don't regret it. And it was great, and that's the price you pay. You know, I hardly saw my dad when I was growing up. He had 3 jobs because he had to pay mortgages and look after ourselves, and wanted to, you know, get a leg up. So he worked like a maniac. So we all make that sacrifice, I think, in whatever we love and our passion. But after spending 40 years of doing that, honestly, I can't see myself sitting in a hotel room, you know, with the remote in my hand going through the channels, just because I have to wait for sound check, or because I don't feel like going out because I don't really know what to do in town, and all of that stuff. That's kind of out of my life now. And the fact that we've been off the road for over 5 years, um, I don't really miss it. I love playing. I do a couple of gigs here and there locally, and it's always a treat to get up and play in front of an audience. But I can't say that I have this, you know, gnawing desire to get out and do it. I did it. 40 years is a long time to be in a band and touring the way we did. Very, very few bands that have done that.
You guys did the miles, and you really wrote the book on a lot of that. Well, hopefully, if there's one or two special shows, we will travel. Just if you just did something in Toronto, but you know, that's again very you know.
Never say never, right? It's you never know. And I think Getty, I don't know if Getty feels quite the same way that I do. I think he'd be up for doing something live, in whatever form that is. But we haven't really gotten to that point of in a conversation. So
That's never say never. I love that's a great quote from tonight. Um, I want we're getting thank you so much for spending some time with us, and we're coming to the end pretty soon. But before I forget, I wanted to give a couple thank yous as well. And you raise you remind me when you speak about how much time Rush has done on the road. Oh my God, you know, just one of the bands that really clocked those numbers. But I want to thank Scully, John McIntosh, for putting this together, and but I also want to thank you guys, because very early on, again, the selflessness, I think, is the theme of Rush, of you, of the material, the fact of sharing and just the friendship. And I really thank you for always touching base on that personally and in the lyrics. But one of the things your band always did was very early on acknowledge that you couldn't do it without your crew. And you really early on we all knew those names, right? Howard and Lionbert and all these folks. But that was really remarkable because you guys kept the same crew for the whole time, and that's amazing. And it says so much about the band. Tell me a little bit about your wonderful crew and kind of, you know, how that.
Well, our band crew, like you say, with Liam, and there was Skip and Howard,
Tone.
Tony, yeah, Jack Secret, yeah, those guys were all there in the beginning, and were there pretty much. Skip wasn't to the end, and a lot of the other crews, lighting or sound or lasers or whatever, the hired crews, they often came back because they said, "No, I don't care what tours coming up, I want to go back to Rush when they come on." And it was a beautiful thing for us. It was quite a compliment. Those guys work so hard. Um, we fly in, or we're on a nice bus or whatever, and you show up at the gig for sound check, and then you have something to eat, you do the gig, and then you get everybody claps and screams and cheers, and you get all the adulation and all the nice stuff, and then you leave and you get on the plane and you go, and those guys, and this, I know, slog it out. They are putting the gear up, they're taking it down. In our case, there was such a loyalty of our crew. They would cover for each other. And that doesn't always happen with a lot of crews. A lot of times there's a real separation between the lighties and the sound guys and the band crew. They don't always get along. With us, guys were filling in for other guys on another crew, because somebody was sick or something came up. And there was a really beautiful feeling of unity throughout our crew, and we always really, really respected them and always tried to treat them as well as we possibly could. I used to hear stories about some bands and how their crews were treated, and it just seemed just so wrong. These are people you work with, whether it's on a stage or in an office. At the end of the day, these are people you work with. You have to respect them. You have to give them space and treat them right. Who are you? Big shot? Rock star? No. These people work hard and they love you for what you're doing and respect you, and you got to give that back. We had such a great relationship with our crew, and we loved them all. They were all great to work with and all part of our family. And I just talked to Scotty. I spoke to Scotty, my guitar tech, this morning, in fact. We haven't even worked together for 6 years. So we're always still connected. And I hear from Liam, I hear from Donovan. It's a good feeling. Lifelong friends, brothers.
It's really inspiring, and it's a lesson that we all saw early on, because again, you thanked them so early. So I wanted to say that too, to the Rush crew.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, this world needs more of that unity and respect, particularly after the last 4 years in America, and now a pandemic, and now this fighting in. I mean, I spent 40 years in that country, longer than I have in Canada, and it's heartbreaking to see what's going on. People just gotta get it together and stop it. It's easy to say that, but
it's and as you say, compounded by this. Wow, this global, this viral thing I'm happy that a lot of people who didn't take it seriously at this point, there's no fooling around here.
no, there isn't.
This is biology. It happens
Yeah,
over and over in human history, and I think,
yeah.
we're just not tuned in that we can't control everything. And but thank you for saying that. A couple other questions from the stream. Someone had asked, Armin Alec says, knowing that your parents, of course, from Serbia, and we've all seen some great things in the movie about that. And do you have any connections back with your Balkan roots? Is there some relatives there, or any influence that you feel that you have
Yeah. Well, I grew up, in a very Serbian home. My parents spoke English, but we spoke Serbian as well. And I didn't actually speak English until I was about, until I started kindergarten. We lived in a part of the city when we first moved to Toronto that was a very ethnic ghetto kind of area of Toronto. And it was all Czechs and Bulgarians and Hungarians, and nobody spoke English, and all the kids played together. Uh, and there was always music, Serbian music or Yugoslavian music, playing in our house. My mother loved it, and my father couldn't really care less about music so much. He was a really sort of a blue collar guy, not really interested in the finer things. Uh, but yeah, so that culture had always been a part of my upbringing. 3 years ago, I went back to Serbia, took my mother and my two sisters, and we went back to my father's hometown of Shabac, which is about an hour from Belgrade. And we spent a week there visiting my cousins and uh, the people that are left of our family there. And it was really a remarkable experience for me. I'd been there in 1966. Was it 60? No, 64 when I was 12. No, 65. I was 12. I spent a summer there with my dad and my younger sister. And I have great memories of that particular trip. So it was great to go back so many years later and still see the town is pretty much the same. There's some newer buildings, but not a whole lot. And the economy is very poor there. The people are generally very poor. But what I noticed was does not matter the things that you have. It's all about your family. It's all about your friends. It's all about sharing. Um, I went out with my cousins a few times for dinner with their friends, and nobody's got any money, but it doesn't matter. Everybody has such a wonderful time being together, and they all love each other very, very much. All the friends, and it was a beautiful thing to see. My Serbian was very rusty. Got better at the end of the week. Uh, it was a little comic at times, I think, for both my sisters and me, but it was really, really a beautiful experience. Now I'm in touch with my cousins all the time, at least every other week, at the very least, which is nice.
Spectacular. No, you're right. The family, family.
Yeah, well, my dad used to go back from time to time, and he built a shed on their little piece of property at the back that they converted into kind of like a home. It's like a one room shed, but it's got a bed in it, and someone sleeps there. And my dad built another sort of other kind of utility shed at the back. Like, he would go and do these things for them because they just didn't have anything, and he was that kind of guy. So in a way, I feel like I'm carrying on his tradition and paying homage to him by doing these things and supporting my family over there.
That's beautiful. Beautiful giving back, and beautiful part of the world. Yeah, I've been there just once on tour,
Mm,
but wow, beautiful old buildings and warm people. Yeah, it just,
crazy though.
you know, beautiful. Um, Victor, you had mentioned a little earlier too about there was a thought for a minute of re-releasing it. Is it? I mean, it's, who knows with the record industry stuff. Do you have that now? If we can go there, could you re-release it and just put it out online so that folks could get it with some extra tracks or something? Is that even?
Yeah, that was the intention. I wanted to, at the very least, remaster, maybe remix. In fact, when they first talked about releasing it, this was last spring. Um, I thought, okay, well, this is an opportunity for me to do the remix, because it's a little bass light, the record. That's my fault. I just was not hearing things the way I should have been. And so this was an opportunity for me to get in and remix and freshen it up a little bit, like we did with Vapor Trails. Um, but as time passed, I was going to add a few tracks. Lover's Calling was one of them, and a couple of other tracks from my little collection of my stuff that little bits that I'd written around that same time. Um, but I don't not really not quite sure what happened. As time went on and so many other distractions, the record company just decided not to do it. You know, they re-released Gets My Favorite Headache last year, and they wanted to do it with Victor, but it didn't come to be. So
Okay. Well, we hope it does. Just judging from the comments and the support tonight, people, I think there's an army of folks around the world that would love to hear that, especially with some additional stuff. On the record again, there's, the synths I just love because I'm a big synth head. Do you remember what you used on there? I mean, I'm hearing could be Prophets or Oberheims. Do you remember what's on there? Virus.
uh, I used a Prodigy. I used a Prophet. I used some rack-mounted synths. Um, I can't recall the names.
Sure.
That was all Adrian's gear
Ah,
set up in our studio. So I just basically took over his stuff.
yeah, yeah,
As I said, he's a co-writer on I think 4 tracks
sure.
on the record. So they were his keyboard ideas. Yeah, I can't recall
Sure.
all keyboard stuff, but
Okay. And the correct way to say your last name, and Adrian's last name,
my proper surname, Zivojinovich.
Zivojinovich. Wow. Everyone messes it up. Zivojinovich.
Yes, it's
Okay.
a scary looking name.
Yeah.
That's why I used Lifeson for most
Sure.
of my life.
Is Adrian doing music these days? Has he,
He does a little bit still. He's a group, 3 or 4 guys that he likes to work with. We have a studio downtown in the city. It's more like a writing room, but all my gear's there and his stuff.
Great.
So I don't know how much work they've been doing this past year, but up until then, they were down there quite a bit. I don't know if they go there and just smoke pot and drink wine and have fun, which I think is most of what they do, and I don't blame them. But
No, that's
yeah, we make use of the space for sure.
that's great. So people can kind of Google that and find some of his work, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they've had a few releases of some stuff, limited releases, but yeah, it's good. It's trancey kind of electronic music.
I'll be looking for it tonight. And so we just got I guess got a couple of fun questions as we wrap up here, Alex. And again, just this has been a pleasure, and most of all to hear that you're doing as well as you can in all the different ways that the challenges that are going on, and that you do see a path to keep creating and,
Yeah.
and, and sharing with us, which has been so inspiring. A couple random questions. On that note well, it's legal now. Do you ever think live long enough to pot's legal in Canada and all these places? But you guys did a track, Passage to Bangkok,
Right.
and for the Rush fans, again, I meet Rush fans who've missed this. Go to 1 minute 49, and there's a little sound on there. Do you know anything about how that sound got in there?
Yeah, I forget. Yeah, that was fun to write that song, and we were cannabis aficionados early on. So yeah, here it was legalized, I think, in 2014 or 2015. And I mean, in America, it, it's quite possibly that on a federal level, it'll be legalized sometime in the near future. It was about time, here in this country, I think it was in 1977, maybe, or maybe it was earlier, 74, maybe something. Or in the early mid 70s, the Ledane Commission was set up by the government to write a paper on the legalization of marijuana, uh, and they recommended that at that time in the 70s that it should be legalized. But the American government was not interested in having a neighbor where everybody was smoking pot. This was the time of Nixon, and so nothing ever came of that until his son, El- uh, Justin Trudeau, legalized it in this country. And you know what? At the end of the day, it was like no big deal. Everybody was excited about it. Everybody, we were on both two sides of an argument. And then after a year, it's like you don't even notice it anymore. It's no big deal. You smell it around a little bit more, but honestly, it was like all those wasted years, right?
Yeah, that's
All those people sent to prison for
oh
smoking a joint.
yeah.
Crazy.
I'm happy that here we're getting more and more states legal, and folks are getting released. So, but
Yeah.
but yeah, fun song, and that's one of those songs. Sometimes people think of Rush as this incredibly serious band, and there's a lot of serious topics. Again, I look back and so many things you guys were right on about witch hunt or show me, don't tell me. I mean, the concept of fake news and wow, you guys, Neil just hit so many great topics, but there was always fun and things
Yeah.
like Pastor Bangkok, and things like your Rock and Roll Hall of Fame speech or any of your gear stuff in the tour books. I love that. There's a real yin yang of just light, you know, uh, uh,
Yeah.
shut up, shutting up on the record. Um, Want to close on the title track because that's just another one that I've played that to so many people and they can't guess who it is because there's no real guitar on it. It doesn't sound like. I love that track. Just a moody, ethereal art piece. And of course, I'd like you to also just touch base on how you ran into at that point, a 45-year-old, a 50-year-old poem by the wonderful W.H. Auden. So talk to me about the Victor, the title track, a bit.
I'd received a book of Audit's poems from my wife as a birthday gift. And I wanted to do a song that was that didn't have guitar, that was completely, out of my wheelhouse. And I was reading through the book, I keep it at my bedside and read through, and I came across the Victor poem, which is very long. And the song is condensed, but it really struck me. And when I was fiddling around with some of these sounds, there was a real darkness to it. And by being judicious with some of the lyrics, I could create this vision and this dark character and dark story, and bringing in the saxophones and bringing in all the other keyboard stuff, and um, it was just something I thought that would be uh, unexpected from me as a guitarist in a rock band, uh, and that was really the motivation on it, and it became one of my favorite songs on the record because of the way it was constructed and how it all worked together and how the storyline worked. So
Wow. Now that's it really is, and it's the timelessness. I know I've said that a few times, but that's the beauty of music. Really, it's all timeless. You put on some Cab Calloway, and if you haven't heard it, it's. But that song in particular, it's from a time and place that's we're back there. A lot of people are listening to ambient music, and there's all these
oh yeah, yeah,
uh,
for sure.
great synthesizer stuff. Um, a couple things on music that we all love and we listen to. I know you've done some work with Steven Wilson. You played on that great Porcupine. Have you heard his new works, which are very electronic? His brand new kind of
Oh no, I haven't yet. No,
it's
no, but I will for sure.
super electronic, all kinds
Oh
of
really?
yeah modular
Cool.
stuff and
Good for him.
yeah. Um, and what are you listening to these days, if anything? What's been
I haven't really been making an effort to listen to too much outside of this room and what I'm doing in this room. Generally at home here, when we're just sitting around, we just put like chill radio on Apple, and I like having that background music. Uh, just not really focused on chasing anything right now. And I always find that when I'm working on something, the less specific music I listen to, the better. It's okay to have that kind of background ambient stuff, but I find it sneaks into what you're doing, and I don't like that feeling. I like to be really, really fresh. You know, I've always written in such a way that it's always the early stuff that's my best stuff that speaks to me the most. And then I move on very, very quickly. And maybe it's because of that laziness or just being a little antsy. Um, I don't really belabor a lot of stuff. I'll come back and I'll listen a million times, but I like to get performances out, and so I like to keep a clear head. So I tend to not listen to much new stuff.
Got you. Well, Alex, this has been really so special, and I want to thank you again for giving us some time. I think I speak for all the fans here, guitar fans, art rock, prog rock fans, Rush fans, that we would love to hear you doing some new music with Getty on your own. Yeah. So please do that. And I also I try to not inject myself into these interviews. It's about what the artist said, but I will say a special thank you because this band has meant so much to me. I saw every tour from '79 to 2012. So I
Wow.
grew up.
Me too.
You were there. You were there. Rush College. From the age of 14, and the music, the guitar playing, the complete textural uh, uh, the journey you guys have had, and most of all that it's going to continue, and you're going to do some new music for us. So
Thank you, Andre. Thank you so much.
thank you, Bill. Thank you. Thanks for checking it out, folks. We'll see you soon.
Okay, see ya.